Right now, about 340 miles above your head, something is moving at 17,000 miles per hour. It's a piece of metal smaller than your thumb, and if it hits the wrong thing, it could trigger a chain reaction that locks humanity out of space for generations. Not in a movie, not in 100 years, possibly within your lifetime. Here's the part nobody tells you. The company most likely to cause it is the same company everyone is cheering for, SpaceX. The rockets are beautiful, the launches feel like the future. And almost everyone watching has decided SpaceX is the good guy in this story. But there's a number most people have never heard, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. 42,000. That's how many satellites SpaceX wants in orbit for a single project, one company, one network. To put that in perspective, in all of human history, across every country combined, we've launched around 20,000 objects into space total. SpaceX wants to more than double that, by itself. So the question isn't whether that's impressive, it obviously is. The question is, what happens when you put that much stuff in a space that was never designed to hold it? To answer that, we need to talk about a man most people have never heard of, and a warning he gave back in 1978. His name was Donald Kessler. He was a scientist at NASA, and his job was to think about a problem nobody else wanted to think about. Garbage, specifically garbage in orbit. Kessler did some math, and what he found was disturbing enough that it now carries his name. It's called Kessler Syndrome. And the idea is simpler than it sounds. Picture a freeway, cars moving fast, but moving together, all in the same direction. That's a healthy orbit, crowded but organized. Now imagine one car blows a tire and flips. It hits another car. That car spins into two more. Debris sprays across every lane. Within seconds, a single accident becomes a 100-car pileup, and nobody can drive through it. That's Kessler Syndrome, except there's a twist that makes space far worse than any freeway. In space, the wreckage doesn't stop. There's no friction up there, nothing to slow the debris down. So every shattered piece keeps flying at 17,000 miles per hour, forever, and each piece becomes a bullet. One collision creates thousands of fragments. Each fragment can cause another collision, which creates thousands more fragments. Here's the terrifying part. Once it starts, it doesn't need us anymore. The debris keeps hitting the debris. The cascade feeds itself. Scientists have a word for this. They call it a collisional cascade, a self-sustaining chain reaction that could turn entire orbits into a shell of shrapnel wrapped around the planet. And if that happens at the altitude where we keep our most important satellites, we don't get that orbit back. Not in your lifetime. Maybe not in your grandchildren's. So now you understand the stakes. The obvious next question is, how close are we, really? The answer is closer than the cheerful launch videos suggest. For most of the space age, this wasn't a real worry. Space is big. Satellites were rare. The odds of two of them meeting were laughably small. Launching a satellite used to cost a fortune, so only governments and giant corporations could afford it. That kept the numbers low. Then SpaceX changed the one thing that kept us safe, the price. By landing rockets and reusing them, SpaceX did something genuinely revolutionary. They made getting to space dramatically cheaper, and that's worth celebrating. Cheaper space access could mean better internet, better science, better everything. But cheaper access to space means more stuff in space, a lot more. This is the part of the story where the hero's greatest strength becomes the danger. The same breakthrough that makes SpaceX amazing is the breakthrough that makes orbit crowded. In 2019, SpaceX started launching a project called Starlink. The goal, beam internet to the entire planet from a fleet of satellites. To do that, you don't need a few satellites, you need thousands, tens of thousands. So they started launching them in batches, 60 at a time, then more, then more. As of today, SpaceX has put over 7,000 Starlink satellites into orbit. They already operate more than half of all active satellites on Earth. One company, half of everything up there, and they're just getting started. Remember that 42,000 number? They're still climbing toward it. So here's where the story turns. Because a crowded sky isn't automatically a disaster, SpaceX has an answer for the danger. They'll tell you they've thought of everything. The question is whether their answer actually holds up. SpaceX isn't stupid. They know about Kessler Syndrome, so they built defenses. And on paper, the defenses sound great. Defense number 1, low altitude. Starlink satellites fly relatively low, around 340 miles up. The advantage is that at this height, there's still a tiny whisper of atmosphere. That thin air creates drag, so if a satellite dies, it slowly gets pulled down and burns up in the atmosphere within about 5 years. It's like a self-cleaning oven. Break something and eventually it disappears on its own. Defense number 2, autonomous avoidance. Each Starlink satellite has a thruster and an automated system. It receives warnings about incoming objects and it moves out of the way by itself. SpaceX says these satellites perform tens of thousands of dodge maneuvers every few months. Sounds reassuring, right? Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because every one of those defenses has a crack in it, and when you look closely, the cracks start to connect. Let's start with the self-cleaning oven. The 5-year burn-up only works if the satellite is alive enough to be controlled, or low enough to fall on its own. But what happens if a satellite dies suddenly? A power failure, a software glitch, a collision, now it's a corpse. Dead weight, moving at 17,000 miles per hour, with nobody steering. And that brings us to the bigger crack, the dodging. The automatic avoidance system has one fatal assumption. It assumes the satellite is working. A dead satellite can't dodge. A dead satellite just drifts, and in a sky filling up with thousands of objects, a dead satellite is a wrecking ball waiting for a target. But it gets worse, and this is the part the launch videos never mention. The dodging system depends on data. Specifically, knowing where everything else is. The problem? Our map of space is incomplete. We can reliably track objects about the size of a softball or bigger, anything smaller, and we're often guessing. And remember, at 17,000 miles per hour, a fragment the size of a marble hits with the force of a hand grenade, so there are tens of thousands of objects up there too small to track, each capable of killing a satellite, and the avoidance system can't dodge what it can't see. Now stack the satellites on top of each other. When you have a few hundred satellites, automatic dodging is easy. Lots of empty space. When you have tens of thousands, owned by multiple companies, with different software that doesn't always talk to each other, now you have two satellites both trying to dodge the same way, like two people in a hallway stepping the same direction, again and again, except the hallway is moving at orbital speed, and a mistake doesn't mean an awkward laugh, it means thousands of new fragments. We've already seen the warning shots. In 2019, a European Space Agency satellite had to fire its thrusters to avoid a Starlink satellite because the automated coordination broke down. In 2021, China formally complained to the United Nations that its space station had to dodge Starlink satellites twice. These aren't hypotheticals, these are near misses, already, with only a fraction of the planned fleet in orbit. So if it's this tense now, what happens when there are 6 times as many? That question leads somewhere most people never consider, because the danger isn't just SpaceX. Here's what changes the whole story. SpaceX isn't alone anymore. When one company proves you can make billions beaming internet from orbit, everyone else wants in. Amazon is building its own network, called Project Kuiper. Thousands of satellites. China is planning constellations of its own, tens of thousands more. Other companies and countries are lining up behind them. Add it all up, and the various proposals point toward more than 100,000 satellites in orbit in the coming years. Let that number sit for a second. We spent the entire space age launching about 20,000 objects. Now we're talking about 100,000 active satellites in roughly a decade. And here's the trap. It's a classic one. Imagine a shared pasture where everyone grazes their sheep. If one farmer adds a few more sheep, he profits. The cost of overgrazing is spread across everyone. So every farmer adds more sheep, each one acting completely rationally, and the field is destroyed. Orbit is that pasture. Every company has a reason to launch more satellites. The profit is theirs, but the risk of Kessler Syndrome is shared by all of humanity. Nobody owns low Earth orbit, so nobody is fully responsible for protecting it. There's no air traffic control for space, no global referee with the power to say, that's enough. Each company swears its own satellites are safe, and maybe each is telling the truth. But safety isn't about one network. It's about all of them crammed into the same shell of sky, dodging each other with software that was never designed to cooperate. So who's in charge of making sure this doesn't go wrong? The unsettling answer is basically no one. And that's where this stops being a space story and starts being your story. You might be thinking, I don't own a satellite. Why does this affect me? Look at your phone. The map that gets you home. GPS, that's satellites. The weather forecast that tells you about the storm coming. Satellites. Global banking, which timestamps transactions using satellite signals. The systems that warn us about hurricanes and wildfires. Airline navigation. Military early warning systems that help prevent wars from starting by accident. All of it leans on the machines we keep in orbit. Now imagine a layer of that orbit becomes a minefield. Insurance costs for satellites skyrocket. Some orbits become too dangerous to use at all. Launching new satellites means flying through a shooting gallery. The technology you use every single day, quietly, without thinking about it, gets more expensive and less reliable. And the dream everyone's excited about? Cheaper internet, space tourism, missions to the moon and Mars. Every one of those has to launch through low Earth orbit. If that layer becomes a wall of debris, we don't just lose satellites, we lose the door. The exit to the rest of space runs straight through the exact region we're filling with garbage, so the company selling us a future in space could be the one accidentally sealing us on the ground. And the strangest part of all of this is what it says about how we make decisions. We are running an experiment we cannot undo. If we fill orbit too fast and the cascade begins, there's no cleanup crew, no reset button, no second attempt. The debris doesn't negotiate, it doesn't slow down, it just keeps hitting and breaking and multiplying. And we'd be doing it for a reason that sounds almost trivial when you say it out loud. Faster internet. That's the trade humanity might be making. Streaming and video calls today in exchange for the risk of locking ourselves out of space tomorrow. Maybe SpaceX is right. Maybe the self-cleaning orbits work. Maybe the dodging holds. Maybe the engineers are smarter than the cynics and we get the connected planet without the catastrophe. That's genuinely possible. They're brilliant people solving hard problems, but here's the uncomfortable truth underneath all of it. We're betting the most valuable real estate in human history on the hope that thousands of machines owned by rival companies, governed by no one, will never make one bad mistake at the same time. Donald Kessler gave his warning in 1978 when the sky was nearly empty. He wasn't worried about then, he was worried about now. So the real question was never whether SpaceX can launch 42,000 satellites. We know they can. The question is whether we can stop ourselves before we find out what happens when one of them goes wrong. And right now, 340 miles above your head, that piece of metal is still moving, still waiting. We just have to hope it never finds something to hit.